Hey, 58, it's Ethan. I'm recording this right now a little bit later at night than normal. And some of that's because I just put my son to bed, and so I have a little bit of peace and quiet. But something I've been thinking about all day, and something that Theodore has actually helped remind me of, is that we're all sinners. Right, you've probably heard that multiple times this week, mainly because that's what we're talking about, and that's what Nathan talked about last week. But we're all sinners, and hanging out with Theodore has really helped me see that, man, we're just born sinners, and it's a lot of what we do. It's a lot of how we think and how we act. We do a lot of sinning. But some encouragement that I want to give you today first is that we're not the only ones. And people in the Bible were also sinners. I know that may sound weird, and you're probably like, of course, I know that. But sometimes it can be encouraging to me to look back at people in God's Word and know that, like, oh, okay, like they also messed up, right? And God was still faithful with them. And one of those that we're going to talk about is King David. Right, David and Goliath. He was described as a man after God's own heart, and we're going to see in Psalm 51 how he had sinned, and we're going to see how he talks to God and how he reacts to him. So he says in Psalm 51 in the first three verses, "Have mercy on me, O God." Remember, this is King David talking. "According to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For my transgressions and my sin is always before me." So David was clearly filled with some shame about his sin, and right now the sin specifically he's talking about is the sin with him and Bathsheba, another man's wife. But the thing about this sin specifically is that it didn't just affect David and his relationship with God, but in fact this sin affected others around him. And so think about this. You're in a soccer game. Some of you play soccer. I played soccer in maybe the fourth grade. But you're playing soccer and the referee makes a call. You get upset. You get frustrated, but you don't say anything, right? But you get this anger. And as the game goes on, you get more and more frustrated to where one of your teammates passes you the ball and you just kick the ball as hard as you can, and boom, it hits someone else, maybe in your teammate or maybe on the opposing team, in the face, right? And maybe you might laugh and you may be a horrible person, or you might think like, man, my anger towards that referee has now affected someone else. And it could go down the line of you could get, your coach could take you out of the game. Your teammates could get upset with you because you could get a red card because of that. And so, again, that's just to illustrate that sometimes our sin is not just a relationship with us and God, but also it can affect those around us. And so David's sin affected others around him, but David felt bad about what he did, and he told God how sorry he was, and God forgave him. And so what I want you to today at some point is I want you to talk to God about your sin. Just talk to him about your sin. I know you may think that God's a policeman and he's just waiting for you to kind of like mess up to give you a ticket, or or he doesn't care. There could be a lot of different views about God, but what I do know is that God cares about your sin, but he also cares enough to send his son to die on the cross for your sin. So he's just going to give you forgiveness when we ask. So the way that I talk to God about my sin is when I pray, I walk through four letters, ACTS, A-C-T-S. And so an A is adoration. I talk about who God is and just how amazing he is. And then the C is confession. And I talk about the sin in my life, whether it's the words I've said or the actions towards someone else, or even just in my head, I need to confess some sin to God. And then I go to thanking God for all of who he is and what he's done in my life. And then supplication, which is talking to God about how I want him to intervene in my life. So my challenge to you this week is talk to God like David. Talk to God about his sin. He said, "Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgression and my sin is always before me." But let's go back up to verse 1, which is really how God feels about our sin. And I want to encourage you to talk to God about your sin, because he says, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion. So, 5th through 8th graders, talk to God about your sin. He has unfailing love towards you, and he has great compassion. He will wash away all your iniquity. Love you guys. See y'all.